Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of our CRE Innovation Series. I'm Wong, Vice President of Data Solutions at Altus Group, a leading provider of CRE intelligence. I'm excited to be your host today. Joining me is Peter Haas, General Manager at Stelumar Advanced Manufacturing Innovations, or SAMI for short. Backed by Mattamy Asset Management, SAMI is a technology company harnessing automation, robotics, and AI to deliver modular housing solutions, not just faster, but smarter. What they're doing is unprecedented, a bold and highly advanced bet on the future of home building, and it couldn't have come at a more urgent time. We've been in a housing crisis in Canada for what it feels like forever, but the situation is worsening. In the GTA, new home sales are on a pace for their lowest level in decades, with single-family sales down over 50% and condo apartment sales down nearly 65% year over year. Employment has fallen to lowest point since 2021, and Ontario's construction employment rate is now over 10%. That's why SAMI's upcoming facility in the GTA is such a big deal, especially at a time when the market urgently needs scalable solutions. Couldn't be more timely. So let's get started. Peter, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then your role at Stelumar?
Of course. Thank you for having me today. So I'm the general manager of Stelumar. We started it a bit over a year ago now, and we're working through the business plan right now and kind of setting up new facilities and getting moving.
Great. Can you tell us about Stelumar and what you do and what makes you different?
Of course. So at SAMI, we are advanced manufacturer trying to solve the housing crisis. And we are doing that through obviously advanced manufacturing, but a lot of robotics, a lot of automation and AI. And we're essentially taking things that would typically built in the field and building it in a factory setting. So we are doing a few things. The first one is we're doing prefabricated walls and floors. And what that means is we are building the walls and floors that you would typically build for a low-rise development out of wood. We're building them with the robotics and automation in the factory. And then we're shipping them to the job site and constructing and framing a home out of those walls. So it allows you to frame a home in a day versus 6 weeks typically that we see today. The other business that we're doing is taking those panels and putting them into modules. So think Lego blocks that would be stitched together. And for that product, we are finishing all the way up to drywall. It's going to be primed, tape mudded, and we're going to have cabinets hung and flooring all in. And that product is kind of the second stool that we're working on. And then the third is a cabinet manufacturing business. And the whole thought process behind that is that as units become denser, people's biggest complaint is, where do I put all my stuff? And by manufacturing cabinets, it allows us to put more built-ins in at a more affordable price, which enables people to have room to put other things.
And this is very different from traditional, or because prefab housing has been around for a while, but is how you're applying the new technology or AI that makes you different?
Yeah, so it's a couple things. So if you look at historical modular houses and prefab, the technology has changed a lot, call it the last 20 plus years. So from the technology side, if you look on the software, everything is mostly designed in 2D right now. You need to design in 3D to kind of take advantage of what you can do with the robotics. But if you're modeling in 3D, you can basically take a Revit model and automatically transition that into machine readable drawings. And then the machines can then operate and produce the product that you need it to produce. Versus in the past, you would have to have multiple people spending time taking that drawing and changing it into a machine readable drawing, which obviously is a massive cost and overhead component to it. So a lot's changed on the software side. You've also changed a lot on the actual hardware and the production equipment. So there is better robotics, there is better automation. And if you're building something in a factory without the level of kind of automation that you need, you're essentially paying for the same people that you would pay on the job site. You just have a very expensive roof over their head. So unless you're making that level of automation investment, it's kind of difficult. And we are doing that, and technology has gotten there for us to do that, which makes a pretty big difference as well.
How do you address the questions whether or not prefab is more sort of cookie cutter? Like, who are you trying to target? And is it focusing on the affordability basis, or because I'm not sure if we can look at sort of custom homes, but how is this different in the way of the different customization or styles that you can produce?
Yeah, prefab and modular homes, there's a huge difference between them. They're not going to be cookie cutter in the slightest. And I'll take it from kind of the two angles. So if you look at the prefabricated walls and floors, it's essentially a form of construction that speeds up the time on the job site. You could build any home out of it, any kind of built form, as long as it's kind of standard stick framing. So that no one would even know if you're a customer at the end of the day, whether it was kind of prefabbed. On the modular side, the facades of all the homes, there's some really cool technology these days about how it's very similar from a process standpoint and a manufacturing standpoint, but the facades can look completely different. So you can really make the buildings look like they should be in the community, and they fit into the community really well. So that's a good way to kind of make them look and feel different. And then within the units themselves, you can also do kind of different designs. So you can have like good, better, best options. So they're going to look different from kind of a finishing standpoint. You can also create different units and connect them differently. So the buildings fundamentally just are different sizes and look different as well.
Okay. And it also depends on who's contracting based on type of location,
For
and
sure.
as well as what type of people they're trying to target to generate this type of product within their development sites, right?
Yeah, 100%. Whoever the end, ultimately we're selling to a developer, and the developers potentially own the product. They're going to sell the product, and their end customer is going to be the one who kind of dictates what it's going to look like.
Great. So this whole Mattamy connection. So Mattamy Investment Management is a large investor in SAMI, and you said that you operate independently and serve a broad range of home builders. Why is this independence so important, and how does it shape your strategy?
Yeah, so it's important from a couple angles. So Peter Gilligan is the founder of SAMI. He's also the founder of Mattamy Asset Management. And one of the ways that enables us to take a big swing at this and have comfort doing that is that we've made a strategic partnership with Mattamy Homes to be a customer of SAMI. So knowing that we have a pipeline of projects and customers allows us to make a bigger upfront investment, which allows you to spend more money on the equipment and the automation and the software side of things, which is a bit of a circular effect because it also enables you to be more efficient within your operations because you were able to make those investments. So there's a big benefit of the partnership and the relationship. But ultimately, we're talking to multiple other developers, and we're all looking at kind of big projects. And it's important because every developer develops differently and at different speeds and has different projects going on. And as a factory, you always want to be manufacturing in kind of a smooth flow. So you always want to be an even manufacturing process. And developers just don't develop like that. And you can't because land's expensive. And as soon as you get your permit, you want to build as quickly as you can. So being independent is important, and working with others is very important for this to be successful.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's turn it to manufacturing technology. We said at SAMI we could slash construction timelines for 6-story condos from 3 years down to 6 months. That's a bold claim. How is that possible?
It is a very bold claim, and we think we can do it. So it's possible because you are moving a lot of the timelines that would be taking space kind of linearly on a job site to not. So we are going to be manufacturing the modules, think of it as the Lego blocks, when the foundation is being poured, when permitting is being done. And it allows us to kind of stitch those together and put them together on the job site very quickly. So we've been spending a ton of time creating unique IP about how to actually stitch those modules together so it's super efficient on the job site, because ultimately the bottleneck is going to be the delivery and the install when we're on the job site. So the more efficient you can be on that, the more efficient you can be on your construction time. So that's the main benefit. And then we're obviously also comparing it to what would typically be a concrete built 6-story condo, which has forming time, and it takes a long time to build just because of the way the nature of the build cycle is. So our construction period is going to be significantly shorter, and we're excited to kind of show what we can do to everyone.
When I looked at that number, I thought it was more due to permitting issues and some challenges with the municipalities, but that's strictly a construction timeline to get the actual structure up, right?
Correct.
So you've already sort of mentioned, there's a great example you use in a way of comparing this to a Lego set, how you sort of pull the different components in. When I still look at that, I find that incredible to shrink that timeline. And that's sort of, it's not just a condo building up to 3 years, but so that's one individual building that you're looking at increasing that speed to build.
Yeah, so that particular example is a 6-story condo building. It's 47 units, predominantly 2 and 3 bedrooms. And it's essentially, think of it as 2 of those Lego blocks to make up a unit. So it's over 150 of those blocks being kind of shipped and stitched together on the job site to create it.
Okay. That's quite incredible. And like, how do you look at KPIs in the way of performance, or what determines whether or not you actually commence a project or hold a project? What are the things that are needed from your side to commit to a project?
Yeah, the key things on our side is knowing that there's actually going to be land in a project there. We also need to look at the timelines of when a project's going to be and make sure it can fit within our production schedule. We don't want to commit to a project if we're already kind of sold out for the 6 months before or after that. We need to make sure we have the ability to produce it. There is also a lot of upfront work that goes on to it in the design phase. So we wouldn't just take a typical project that someone has and they'd be like, hey, can you now do this in a modular fashion? You truly need to spend a lot of time designing the units and designing the building and thinking about how you can modularize it, is a term we've been using, but how to actually put it into those Lego blocks. So when you send it, you can stitch it together in a way that's efficient, because there's a pretty big difference in the way people build things, and not all of it works with this construction technique. So you do need to spend a lot of time on the upfront design, doing everything. And a lot of it is bringing that design a bit more forward in the process and doing a lot more coordination with all the consultants that you would typically use. It's less of kind of a trade-off from one to the next. It's a more of let's work together as a team. So there is some change management on the typical process that you would follow.
Well, especially with certain customizations for the building itself, how do you factor in those individual requests based on some of the homes are being sold by the developer? Does that impede or slow down your process on your end by adding sort of a closet or a different component of it?
Yeah, so ultimately it depends what the change is. The way the equipment is set up and the way we've been integrating and interacting with developers is we kind of have a box of rules that people can follow, and then they can kind of play within that. And then from equipment standpoint, it's all what's called batch one, which means every single kind of wall or floor that comes off the line can be completely different from the one before. That being said, it needs to fit within a certain level of kind of parameters for it to work.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. Here's kind of the box you need to play in. The other thing that we're trying to give customers the choice on more on the finishing side. So instead of fundamentally changing the layout of a suite, for example, maybe there's one or two options that people can pick from, but it's thinking about like, hey, what can we do with millwork and cabinetry? What can we do with different finishes or different floor types? And that's how you can kind of think of it. Like, a good example is if you look at a car, uh, you could go to the auto dealership and there's a whole bunch of different options you can pick from, but you're not fundamentally redesigning the car. You're looking at set kind of lists of options that you can do a lot of full customization, but you're not kind of redesigning it from scratch.
That's great. Now, I know we've been hearing quite a bit about some of the challenges with the municipalities and with development charges. I guess you don't worry about that from a builder standpoint. That's more the developer sort of pushing through those costs. But when you look at regulation, I think the focus right now is just the GTA to get started on it and the region and then expand from there, right?
Yeah, our initial focus is going to be on the GTA. Our first project looks like it's going to be in Mississauga, but we are having conversations with different groups that would be much broader than the GTA, but the initial ones will be for sure. And then from a kind of development charges and everything side, it's not our
Yeah.
responsibility to work ourselves through the whole development permitting and the development charges, but it does obviously impact us also because if there's not set timing, we're kind of like notionally agreed to do a building with someone, but if the timing's kind of amorphous, that's super hard to plan a production schedule from because it could be 3 months out, it could be a year out, and it's hard to kind of take on more projects. So it is important to make sure there's clarity there. Then obviously the lower development charges are, the more demand there's going to be from customers, the more supply we can put on as kind of builders in the community. So it'd be a win for everyone.
And especially with some of the challenges we're now, because we spoke a little bit earlier about the pre-sales with some of the new homes in the GTA. And I guess from a cycle basis, there's a fair amount of uncertainty in the marketplace and interest rates that are causing some of that delay, which I guess until you get this thing up and running, whether or not how to sort of look at those differences, especially when you're looking at different developments in different municipalities, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does that work in the way of different building codes? Yeah, especially when you're looking to expand to other type of municipalities or in the future in different provinces. So how would you sort of factor in those different regulations depending on where you build?
It's a problem we're working through. So the spark notes are that modular, specifically if the wall is fully closed, so volumetric modular or closed wall prefab walls and floors. The way the system works is that they get CSA approved. So
Yeah.
it's CSA 2577. And what that means is that we have inspectors come visit the factory. They confirm that we are building what we are say we're going to build, and they do a quality inspection. And there's a whole quality kind of system and process behind that. And then what that means is on the job site, the inspector doesn't actually need to inspect the modules themselves or the closed walls themselves. What they then need to inspect is kind of everything else and then how those are connected and how you connect to, for example, your HVAC system or electrical or your water. So there's some learning from the inspector side because not everyone is aware of these rules and how it works. But that's kind of the spark notes on it. And CSA follows Ontario Building Code. There's definitely an issue and a conversation to be had on shipping things out of the province. There's different guidelines within municipalities that the Ontario government has done some work on, which is helping. But if we're shipping something from Ontario to Quebec or any other province, it's a completely different ballgame and is frankly an impediment to modular taking off unless on a broader provincial basis.
Yeah, this goes into this next area with respect to the government's role. Prime Minister Carney has pledged billions to support prefab housing and manufacturers. And obviously your plans are already in motion, but did this federal support accelerate your go-to-market strategy or influence your long-term plans?
100% it can and it will. We were far along this journey before anything was announced, so it was super great timing from our side. We couldn't have been happier to kind of see that it all came through. Uh, from a modular development standpoint, there's a couple areas that are kind of important. So one is it's super expensive
Yep.
to build the factory and put the level of automation that you need. So any help on kind of the cost up front would make it more beneficial for the whole industry and enable more players in the market and everyone to be more cost competitive going forward. The other element that is important is thinking about smoothing out production flows. So as we talked about, any private developer, as soon as they get their permit and can start building on the land, they can't wait. They need to develop it right away because time is money and kind of the holding costs of those lands add up. And that's the exact worst way for a factory to operate. So a factory wants to be kind of straight like this, producing the exact same amount every day, and developers are like that in a wave. So if there's any programs or purchasing by the government to enable kind of the smoothing out of production within the factory setting, it would have a major benefit for the industry and to kind of make it more sustainable in the long term. So that would be another bigger area that the federal government could potentially play in. The other important element of this whole conversation is that we're touching on it, but we're a portion of the full life cycle of what it takes to build a new home or build a new unit. And it's the construction portion, and it's very important to figure out how to optimize that and speed it up. But ultimately, there needs to be kind of thought put into, and there is thought being put, but there needs to be solutions for the whole life cycle in order to kind of solve the housing crisis here in Canada.
I guess it's also a learning process that as you come up with different hurdles and different strategies to deal with, right? And the more time you can work with the municipalities as well as look at other sort of provincial jurisdictions and expansions, that you'll adjust your plan accordingly, as well as you probably know at that point where the demand is actually coming from, right?
Yeah, 100%. There's a lot of examples. I can give you one on the transportation side. So depending on where you are in the province and which municipality, there's completely different rules on what and when you can transport. The example would be if a module is 14 feet wide, in some jurisdictions, you need a police escort for that.
Yeah.
Some you need a private escort for it. And in all of the jurisdictions, the rules aren't very clear. So it kind of depends on who you're talking to that day when you're trying to get the permit in order to transport something. So there's clarity on regulations and kind of having a more provincial wide or Canada wide rules would be extremely helpful. And that's just one example of many. There's some on the building code side, specifically in Ontario. We're very prescriptive on how you want to build a wall, for example, and it'll tell you exactly what the buildup of that wall needs to be to hit certain performance requirements. But that's all assuming that that wall is being built within or on the field or on the job site. And what you can build on the job site versus what you could build in the factory can be very different.
Yeah.
So you can look at kind of what the standard buildup would be in, it's called the UL listings. And you could redo that in a factory, or you could try to take advantage of the fact that you're in a set environment, that you have machines where you know that screw or nail is going in exactly where it needs to go every time. But that kind of more relies on a performance-based building code, which we don't currently have, but might get to one day. Or you could create the walls and do a whole bunch of testing and get a new UL listing or get it approved. But that just costs money and take time. It is one of the things we're working on, and we think you need to do it to take advantage of kind of building in a factory, but it takes time and money.
With everything going on today with trade tariffs discussions, it seems like there's an announcement every other day of changes with.
I think there was one today.
Was there?
Yeah.
Well, I heard about the copper one. How do you try to deal with the fluctuating prices or the unknowns on a day by day or a month by month basis?
Yeah, so we've been putting a conscious effort to make sure we're sourcing within Canada to avoid the rest of the tariffs. There is certain product that we don't develop in Canada, so you can't source it from here, or we can't do it in an affordable manner. So we've been really looking at A, kind of a Canada first strategy, and then B, if we are sourcing from other jurisdictions, it's let's not just rely on it coming from the US, for example. Let's look at options from different countries in Europe or Asia. So, kind of having a multi sourcing mandate to build a whole bunch of redundancy in the cycle. But our first kind of step is if we can get it affordably within Canada, then we're going to do that first every time.
All right. And Prime Minister Carney has also said that prefab housing in Canada can become a housing export hub. Is your factory initially is focused domestic, but do you have international market aspirations?
Factory number one and probably number two is going to be focused within Canada just because there is so much demand here and we have a real crisis that we think it's where we can and should be focused and it's where the market is. Long term, we're open to everything and we want to grow. I would be surprised if we didn't go to the US at some point in the medium term. That would be the more obvious one to go to kind of right away. It's has a similar kind of building type and building cycle to Canada. And I would also say is significantly behind from kind of an innovation standpoint compared to a lot of the European or Asian markets. So it's ripe for disruption. And if we can figure it out here, I'm sure we'll be going to the US quickly.
Great. Look at the environment impact. There's growing awareness of embodied carbon, that emissions associated with materials, construction, and transportation, and that happens before a building even opens its doors. Our colleagues in Australia say it can count for over half of a building's lifetime emissions. How does the modular construction impact or reduce this carbon footprint?
So there's a couple elements to that. One is if you look at the first project that we're doing, or first building type that we're doing, it's kind of 6-story wood frame structure, 47 units, as I mentioned, kind of a bigger building. That would historically have been made out of steel and concrete. And wood versus steel has or wood versus concrete really has completely different embodied carbon metrics. So anything you can push towards being built in wood is significantly better for the environment. The other element to it is when you are building with a lot of automation and equipment, you know that you're hitting that nail every time where you need to hit that nail. And you actually need to use slightly different material than kind of the standard dimensional lumber. And that's because if you go to Home Hardware and get a 2x4 and you look at the 10 different ones there, they're all going to be slightly different sizes. They're all going to be bowed or bowed in different ways. So we really need to use different types of engineered lumber. And engineered lumber is also typically stronger. And with that in mind, you can have different stud spacing. You can actually use less material because the material itself is stronger when you, for example, build a wall. And if you have less studs, that means you can put more insulation within the wall also, which means you kind of have less thermal bridging. And you ultimately have a better performing wall from kind of that ongoing operating carbon also.
Wow. So, obviously, what you're doing is pretty incredible with prefab homes. Are you able to share anything else on where your company's heading, or is there anything that we're missing through questions that we've gone through? Anything that you want to add to this?
Yeah, I would just say we're really doing this at a scale that's never before seen in Canada. And our factory, we're working with kind of one of the two big equipment manufacturers on the side as the primary supplier for the panels and modular side. And this is going to be their global flagship factory. So we're taking a really big swing at this. And we're excited to kind of be the industry leader here and take it as far as we can.
Well, that's fantastic. And in a way of that Canada really needs to accelerate the construction of new homes, especially based on something that is affordable. Thank you for joining us in the fourth episode of our CRE Innovation Series. We hope you enjoyed this discussion with Peter of SAMI on their new venture to disrupt home building with modular innovation. If you found this conversation insightful, be sure to like and subscribe. You can follow Peter Haas, that's HASS, on LinkedIn to keep up with SAMI's progress and updates. We'd love to hear your thoughts and any questions you might have. So feel free to leave a comment below and stay tuned for our next episode where we'll explore more areas of innovation in CRE. Thank you.